Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a special video because this video is in collaboration with my friends over at Luminary Guard. They are one of the newer sponsors of the channel. They provide high-end rifles like this Ridgeline LRP. They provided me with my night vision setup as well, helmets, nods, lights, lasers. They are going to be your one-stop shop for that. But the whole reason for this video is the owner of Luminary Guard, a good friend of mine, wanted his rifle, this LRP, to be rattle canned. And so he thought it'd be a cool video to put up on the educational side of the Luminary Guard website, and also, just another video for me. So we're going to do a little bit more in-depth video on how I spray paint my rifles. If you guys have been one of the earlier subscribers of the channel or have been following me on Instagram for a while, you will have seen my original spray painting video where I painted my Accuracy International ATX. And it was an okay video, did in the basement of my parents' house. But this one I'm going to try and make a little bit more high quality, explain some of the philosophy behind why I chose that pattern and why I have continued to kind of add to it and do it on basically all of my rifles. So this one will be instructional, kind of educational, a touch of the tism as all of my videos are. But yeah, let's start taping this rifle up. All right, so to start off, I want to kind of explain my pattern. I didn't really, well, okay, I take that back. I was going to say I didn't really have any inspiration for the pattern, but I did have some significant inspiration. Because I'm so obsessed with Accuracy Internationals, I started with painting my first Accuracy International, my AT. Let's grab it actually. Okay, so a lot of the paint is rubbed off, but this is my original Accuracy International and AT with the thumbhole skins. So to start off, the inspiration from my original pattern came from the AWMs, the L118s, L115s that the British military uses, the big Arctic warfares. And I can't remember where I saw the picture, but it was a striped camo pattern. It wasn't really similar to this, but it was one that was, the bigger, thicker diagonal stripes. And that is where I took the original inspiration for this paint job. Let me put this back real quick. And I continued to do that pattern on basically the rest of my rifles. And I started to kind of see what worked and what was effective in my environment and the specific colors. So you can change this pattern. There are the colors in this pattern to match your environment as best as possible. But I am in kind of the Utah desert, so I do have some alpine, like higher pine trees, but for the most part it's mountainous desert out here in kind of northern central Utah. So a lot of junipers, a lot of sagebrush, a lot of just kind of light gray sandy colored dirt, and I think these colors match it well. But to explain the stripe pattern, let me set this down. Well, I won't set this down. So to explain the stripe pattern, when you think about camouflage and what you're essentially trying to do, you're not just trying to match the colors around you. You're trying to mask your very recognizable silhouette and your outline. So when you wear, when a sniper wears camouflage, when he wears his ghillie suit or his viper hood, he's masking the head and shoulders silhouette. He's trying to make those, make a line that covers this, these two angles that are very distinct and very easy for the eye to pick out. And so I took that philosophy to this pattern. And, I'm not dressing it up with any kind of rifle ghillie right now, which can add to the camouflage. But what my main objective is, I want to mask this very distinct part of the rifle. Yeah, the barrel and everything else, but these things are smaller but much, you know, they have a lot less to them, so they're easier to conceal. But these bigger parts that are a lot more easily recognizable from, you know, perpendicular, those are what I'm trying to mask. So you'll see in my patterns, I have much thicker stripes going up these parts. So I'm trying to darken those areas and lighten other areas to just break up that very recognizable silhouette. And so that will be something that when we start spraying this rifle, I will, you know, that's the purpose of these bigger stripes essentially. It's pretty simple, but I mean, it's not complicated at the same time. It's a very simple pattern. It's not very fine. I don't think you need to go super, super fine. You don't need to do a smaller multicam kind of camouflage in that kind of color pattern. I don't see the need. I've used this pattern for a long time and it works extremely well in my environment. I can set this rifle down and go 10 feet away and, you know, obviously if you're looking straight at it, you'll be able to say, oh, the rifle's right there. But in your peripherals, which is what you're trying to mask, is that your eye from catching a very recognizable silhouette so that your finer central vision will distinguish it from the rest of the environment. You want to defeat the peripherals because everyone's going to be scanning. So that's the purpose behind this camouflage. So that's kind of my autistic breakdown on my camo pattern. So let's get into the funner part. Okay, to start off, taping. How do I tape the rifle? And that is kind of up to you. Starting off, I'm not super picky when I go and tape my rifle. I tape off the essential parts, which are mostly on the optic. So when you go to tape the optic, you're obviously going to tape the numbers. So you want to tape all of the information around the turret, magnification ring, parallax, and obviously cover the eyepiece and objective lens. So that's super simple. Kind of the same thing on the rifle. You could honestly, you know, if you really wanted to, you could just not tape anything on the rifle. Because, you know, you've got your dust cover, you've got your charging handle, it covers everything. Essentially all the moving parts are covered. So I guess you could tape the fire and safe roll marks on your lower, which I don't really see a need to. I do tape the threads just to keep that super clean. But, you know, to be super honest, I don't tape hardly anything on ARs. You know, that's just how I am. I do tape the trigger. Sometimes I'll tape the grip if I have a rubberized grip. This is just a B5 grip, but like on my SB10M, it's got a K2 Plus, so it's a little rubberized. I will tape that. I don't like the tackiness that the spray paint makes. So I'll tape a few things. I just use simple painter's tape. I find it the easiest to use for these, except it rips like an absolute word I can't say on YouTube. Okay, here we go. Now it's actually going. So I'll tape the barrel or the threads, and you know, if you have a muzzle device on there already, you probably don't need to do that. So I'll tape that. I'll take a little chunk and tape the trigger. And it's not fancy. Like, you'll see that like I get a little bit more, you know, detailed when it comes to the pattern, but for the most part, when you mess up spray painting, it's a very easy fix. You just paint over it or use a paint remover. So there's like this weird rubber stuff on this side that I need to get off. That is another thing I will say. Wipe the rifle down, especially if it is a new rifle, because paint doesn't stick to oil very well. So wipe it off. This rifle is fairly new. Just make sure that there's no overly oily spots because your paint won't stick and it will look bad. So I'm not going to tape this rifle other than that. So let's lay out some cardboard and I will put the base coat on. All right, so the first part is super simple. I always start with the lightest. These are the colors that I'm using, just the Rust-Oleum camouflage colors. I always start with the light color, the lightest color of your environment, I should say. So, which I guess yeah, the lightest color, but also the most prominent color should be your base coat in your environment. So if you go outside, look around. There are some apps that you can do. There's even a filter on Instagram. Like you can take a picture and click like the filter, and it will give you a color palette of the most prominent colors in your environment. So you could go and do that. Like whatever, if you're outside, take that picture, or wherever you plan on trying to hide your rifle with your person. Go and take that picture, or just go and make a note of the colors that you see most or where you plan on being. And then that should be your base coat. So let's start with this. Obviously, do this in a very well ventilated area. I'm just in my garage with the garage open. But yeah, this is always my favorite part. It's the most satisfying. All rifles look cool in FDE. That's just a fact. Now I'd like to keep it pretty far away, like at least a foot. Any closer, it'll start to get all drippy, which you don't want that. And I do pretty light coats. I don't go crazy. Now I'll let that dry for just a second. Usually in a warm environment, this dries pretty quick. So maybe 2 or 3 minutes, because you want to make sure that the contact points when you flip it over aren't gonna, stick to your cardboard, but that's not a big deal because it's gonna get painted over again anyway. All right, so that's done. I'm gonna let that dry for about 10 to 15 minutes, because after this, that's where we start putting tape on. And if you do it too early, when you go to remove the tape, it will just pull the paint clean off of your gun. So we're gonna let this dry for about 10 minutes, and we will come back and start taping it again. Okay, so now that we're dry, a good indication of dryness, don't, like, when you put your hand on it, that will feel dry, but rub it. So like that will give you a good indication of how dry it is. And it's been about 10 minutes. So now we're going to move into the initial stripes. So how I like to get my stripes is I like the wider painter's tape to begin with, but I will take that strip and I will just rip it pretty haphazardly down the middle. And I'll set one piece aside. And that is, the left or the right side of your stripe. And I like these bigger stripes to go around the more distinguishable part of the rifle. So I'll start right here. I'll maybe start right there, angle it up. And I like to get into all these little finer parts of the rifle. So now that is essentially the right side of our stripe. And I'll take that other piece of tape that kind of mirrors it, and I'll offset it a little bit. And you can make it as wide or as fat as you want. So I'm going to make the point right here. Then I'm going to go down, and I'm going to carry this stripe all the way down the grip. So I'm going to take and make sure that's adhering nicely first, just so I don't get... I like these stripes to have good sharp contrast with the rest of the, with the base coat, so I like to make sure it's sticking nicely. And I'll take another piece to finish that stripe off, just, rip it, and I'll carry that stripe all the way down. So that is essentially the first stripe. And we'll continue. I'll probably put 4 to 5 big stripes depending on the rifle. So I'll get another piece, do that rip, make it kind of jagged, set the one piece aside, and I'll make this one kind of go. We'll just put this one down the stock. Go around here. And some of the stripes I won't even close up, like it'll just kind of fade into right here. So I'll take this one all the way down and over. So right there is a stripe, and when we go to paint it, you're painting in this stripe, and we'll mask off the rest so that you don't get any overspray. So now we'll move up to the rail, and if you rip straight, you don't have to tape it straight. You can set it on more jagged. You know, it doesn't really matter if the tape wrinkles, just as long as the inner line is like adhering good. That's really all that matters. So now that our stripes are in place, we're just going to go in and mask off in between the stripes. And this, you can do this really fast. Like, you don't have to, this doesn't take any real high degree of precision or anything. You just want to make sure that you're not going to get any overspray. So that's really all that needs to come down for, needs to be done for masking. So now I'll go to, when I'm doing these stripes, I want to do the second most prominent color in your environmental color palette that you've come up with. And for me, that is this deep forest green. And this isn't really a, I guess this is a more of a flat and kind of lighter green. It's an OD green, but not quite as rich. I don't know how you describe colors. So this fits really well with like the color of the junipers and the pines, and you know, some of the sagebrush, the darker points of the sagebrush. So you make sure you shake it up really good too, because you'll get that just kind of nasty looking color. So now the stripes don't need to be crazy at all. It's just like that. Just make sure you're getting all of it. And that's pretty much it for the stripes. So now we'll let this set for a second, and we'll take the tape off, flip it over, and do the same thing on the other side. This is the more very satisfying part. I love taking the tape off of the first stripes. This is when you really start to see it come together. And we'll go back and add more. So I'll probably add a few touches in here. But now I'm going to flip it over, do the same thing. I won't show that just for, you know, time's sake. All right, we got the left side sprayed. So we're going to take the tape off. Just another very satisfying moment. I did a little bit fatter stripes on this side. See, they didn't get that gunk completely off, so it peeled some of the tape off. That's all right. That's the thing about spray painting. A lot of people get too concerned about mistakes when you can just fix them. And see, now it's really starting to look sick. So the next detail I'm going to do is I like to add either a black or a darker brown stripe along with, like on one side of these. For me, you know, there could be other answers to this, but for me, to my eye, it helps give it some depth, so that when you are trying, you know, when you go and set the rifle up or just set it down, kind of testing out the camouflage, it gives some contrast and some depth, and kind of helps trick the eye, depending on, you know, if you're putting it next to a bush or under a bush, it makes it just look, you know, it adds depth. I don't know how else to explain that. So I'll show you how I do that. Essentially, it's the exact same method. And it really doesn't matter which side of the stripe you put this thinner dark stripe on. So let's put it on the back end of the stripe. So what I like to do is I'll try and follow the stripe as best I can. And it doesn't matter if you don't follow it perfectly, because obviously it's going to get painted on, but I like to leave just a little bit of green on the, the stripe side of the tape, so that when you do paint, it's a sharp contrast from like tan to black to brown to green. So that's just kind of my philosophy behind this accent. So I got that. And now, like I said, this stripe is going to be much thinner. This is a kind of an accent stripe to add that depth. So I'll start it as a point, and we'll just go up, and I'll add some fatter parts. But I really don't like to make it more wide than an inch at most throughout the rifle. And these ones I usually do like to close off at the end. So that's going to be our black contrasting stripe. So we'll go ahead and do that on the rest of our stripes. And you don't have to be crazy, like, detailed with this. You can do this fairly quick. Maybe your first time be a little bit more, I can't find the word. Detail oriented. It's okay if the tape's wrinkled, if it's not coming up all the way. That's camouflage. Camouflage is chaos mimicking chaos. So I think the more mistakes in your camouflage that aren't mistakes of, too much of one color and stuff like that, the better the camouflage will be. There's technical things that you shouldn't do when camouflaging something, but the rest is kind of up to you and your artistic mind, or, autistic. My mom has always called me an artist, autist, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I mean. This is just my version of painting Warhammer minifigures. Okay, and then after you've done that, we'll go through and mask off again. Let's hit it with our darker color. And this, you can do black or brown. I've done both, and it kind of does the same trick. I'm going to try black on this one just for fun. All right. And this one, I'm not going to go super heavy on. Okay, so now we'll let that dry. Pull the tape off, flip it over, do it on the other side. We're kind of finishing up on here. Now, what I like to do is fill the gaps if there are any. I feel like this is pretty good. I don't like to overdo it. You obviously lay the base coat because that is the most prominent color in your local environment, so you don't want to cover that up a ton. And if you're planning on actually trying to camouflage yourself further, like, if we're being completely honest, we do this because it looks cool, and there is some practicality that might be used, 0.1% of a time that the rifle is going to be employed. Other than that, we just want it to look cool. So when you do go and, veg up, try and camouflage yourself, you can always go darker with veg and stuff like that, but it's really hard to get lighter, so I don't want to get any darker than, I have to with the permanent stuff. Any other of the temporary stuff like veg, scrim, any other camouflage that can just be, thrown onto the gun, that can darken up, as the environment dictates. But for the permanent stuff, I like to try and stay on the lighter side. Anyway, that said, now we are going to use this. So this is just, I think it's from Voodoo Tactical, but if you guys are familiar with northern Utah and you've driven, the freeway that goes north, you'll drive past Smith & Edwards, and that is where I got this. It's just a sniper veil. I think you can order them on Amazon as well, and I feel like it gives a great texture that's big enough and small enough at the same time. It's big enough and like the material is thick and heavy enough that when you do spray it, the paint doesn't go down and then just kind of go under the pattern and kind of negate the pattern. I've used other materials that are light and have kind of the same grid dimensions, but it's a lighter material, so the paint goes under and just kind of and doesn't really translate the pattern onto the gun. So I feel like this one is very solid. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my original color, my lighter color, and you should always see, I did it. That's my lighter color. Don't get your lids mixed up. So what I like to do now is I'll go and just barely lighten up the dark spots. You're not going to go and spray the light color on the already light color. So make sure this is spraying good, and I'll do it just very lightly, but I like to make sure that my pattern is pressed onto the gun well so it translates well. So I'm just going to go over my green and black stripe, and I'm just going to just like that. I don't want to completely negate the stripe, but I want to add some texture to it. So really not a lot, but it goes a long way. So I'll probably put a little bit more right here and right there. And we're going to do, what I like to do also is between sprays, I'll shift the entire, piece of material so that that pattern shifts. So you're not just laying down a very precise, constant grid across your gun. So I'll add a little bit more texture there, up here, and down there. And then I'll do the same now with the brown because we haven't used that. Get this one going. So now I'm going to add the darker brown into the lighter spots. And sometimes even with this, since I didn't do a really solid stripe with the brown, I'll go and just do a closer, really fast, just swipe on the lighter spot to break it up a little bit. And I feel like this also adds some depth. It makes it look like there could be a branch that's, out of focus because it's on a different focal length that you're trying to look at. So there's a really sharp contrasting line, and then there's a really light, like almost not contrasting line. It just fades into that brown. So adding these, lighter brown stripes are giving that illusion of depth into the rifle. And I'll just hit it with a few more spritz to break it up. So now when we pull it off, we're really starting to get that color in there. And now I'll add a few just little, here and there. So that's kind of how we're getting that illusion of depth, like I was talking about. You got super sharp contrasting, they're on the same focal length, but then, this could be further or closer, and it just gives it that nice illusion of depth, and you start to see that in the rifle. So I'm happy with that. I really, you're always going to be tempted to go and just keep adding pattern, but at some point you need to show a little restraint, be like, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. But one thing I am going to do, I went a little heavy right here with that brown, and so it's a super easy fix. I'll put my mesh down, and I'll hit it with that, and it breaks it up and adds a little bit more contrast to it. So now we're going to do that to the same thing to the other side. I'm going to lay down my mesh, make sure it's nice and tight to it. We'll start with the lighter stuff. Hit that a few spots, add some texture, and then we'll do a quick little shift in pattern. Go in with the brown, hit the light spots. Now we'll see how it looks. So that's good. I'm gonna add just a few of those wider stripes. And one thing I'm gonna do, throw my mesh down, I'm just gonna add a few touches of green, very light ones, to my lighter spots. Just far away like that. And those are almost imperceptible, but they do add a very nice, they just add a little bit more detail to the pattern. So now I'm going to say we're done. I did go a little dark on this side, so I might lighten that up just a touch, so I can go and just see and just kind of open it up a little bit right there. And one thing I do like to do as just a finisher, just like that, it just adds that much more texture and lightens up some of the spots that I feel like I went a little too heavy on. Because these lighter stripes that have really no contrast to them, they just fade into each other. That's something I've been experimenting with lately, and it does add a very nice depth to the rifle. So I'm going to say we're done. So let's put it up on the tripod, get a few detail shots, and talk about it. All right, guys, so that is my process that I've kind of refined over the past, 5 years, since I really wanted to, get good at something. So when I do something like this, when I want to perfect something, and I won't say this is perfected, but I think it's very effective and works. So yeah, when I do that, I like to figure things out. I like to experiment, and so far each little tweak to my pattern, each rifle gets better and more effective at camouflage, and that's the ultimate goal. But if we're being 100% honest, we're doing this because it looks cool, and I think this pattern achieves that very well. So yeah, pretty simple process. I don't think it's a really hard thing to do. I think you need to just stay simple. Don't overcomplicate it. We only did 4 stripes over the base coat, small stripes on those, and then added texture. There's very few steps. Show a little restraint when it comes to the texturing and also the stripes. Like I said earlier, you will look at it and be like, oh, maybe some there, maybe some there. You'll want to fill the gaps where you're getting a lot of that, the lighter colors, but you need that lighter color there because that's, like we said, that is the most prominent color in your environmental color palette that you went out and created. So just be aware of that. If you hate it when you do it, you can do 2 things. You can paint over it, which 2 coats of paint aren't going to hurt. Like if you do a whole paint job and then just completely paint it, that's not going to be bad. 3 might be pushing it. 4, yeah, you're going to start to build up paint where it shouldn't be. The second option is you can use paint stripper. There's some in the can. I don't know if I have some right here, but I have painted a whole rifle. Whew, it's late, sorry. But I have painted a whole rifle and then stripped the whole rifle back to the original Cerakote, and it was fine. It's a little bit of a process, but it's very doable, super simple, and it is possible. My ATX was completely painted. I stripped it and had it re-Cerakoted because the base Cerakote was the Red Rocket Red from AI. But yeah, like you saw in my original painting video. So yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Again, this was an educational video did in collaboration with my friends over at Luminary Guard. This is the owner of Luminary Guard's rifle. I'll be sending it back to him and he will continue to build it out. But yeah, very happy with our partnership. Very good people. They're dudes that just want to bring the absolute best to their customers at the best price possible. But we also are doing only the best gear, so super high-end stuff. A lot of really good nylons, soft goods, hard goods, and obviously weaponry and night vision lights and lasers. So hit them up for anything that you guys need. This video will also be going up on their website in the educational part. We'll be doing a lot more videos in collaboration with those guys with, you know, with this kind of educational content in mind, how-to videos, maybe some shooting videos, stuff like that. But yeah, definitely let me know your thoughts. I would love to see or hear about your camo patterns. I know this isn't the end-all be-all of camo patterns. This is one of those situations where there are many, in fact, probably infinite ways to skin this cat. So let me know in your comments patterns that you like, patterns that are effective in your environment. Yeah, this has just kind of become my signature pattern. So again, thanks to Luminary Guard for helping the channel out in a very big way. Very appreciative of those guys. Excited to get this rifle back in his hands. No, I will not be offering a spray painting service. I've had a few people ask about that. I want you guys to learn how to do that. That's the whole reason I started this channel. I want you guys to do the things that I have enjoyed, and I want you guys to get good at them as well. So I'm not going to do things for you. I'm just here to spark that interest. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks so much for the support as of late. The channel has grown insanely fast, and I'm so grateful. You guys have opened up a lot of more opportunities for me and my family, and I'm very grateful, and I'm looking forward to providing a lot more content for you guys. So thank you. See you on the next one.